A man boards a train in Milan, quiet and unassuming with a paperback book and a thin briefcase. 2 rows behind, a woman scrolls through her phone. Across the aisle, a photographer captures Italian landscapes, ordinary passengers on an ordinary morning, except none of them are who they appear to be. 3 hours later, the man is found dead in a locked bathroom, foam on his lips, a faint scent of almonds in the air. No weapons, no signs of struggle. Authorities will call it natural causes until fingerprints reveal the truth. The corpse belongs to a high-ranking Hamas commander. Israel had hunted him for years. This was a perfected assassination, invisible, untraceable, executed in motion. The conductor knocked 3 times before breaking down the toilet door. What he discovered inside would trigger an international investigation that would unveil the invisible mechanics of modern killing. On the body, there were no injuries, no signs of violence, nothing to indicate a crime. Yet, within hours, intelligence agencies across 3 continents were exchanging encrypted messages about a man who died exactly as the most elite Israeli operatives were taught to make people disappear. Mahmoud al-Halat was not his real name. The passport was one of 27 fake documents used over 8 years of shadow work between Gaza, Damascus, and European capitals. For Hamas, he was Abu Tariq, a silent engineer who built financial networks to funnel millions for weapons. For Mossad, he was target number 1, Red, whose elimination was sanctioned at the highest levels of the Israeli government. And for the passengers sharing his morning in coach number 4, he was simply a quiet traveler, reading a book and minding his own business. None of them knew that the woman 2 rows behind was not a tourist, that the man photographing landscapes through the window was not an amateur photographer, that under the seat in front of Mahmoud was hidden a modified device smaller than a deodorant stick. It was designed to release a complex toxin that, hours after exposure, would mimic a heart attack. The mechanism of murder was set in motion days before. By the time the train left the Milan platform, Mahmoud's death was a mathematical inevitability. This is the story of how intelligence agencies turn murder into an art, how bureaucracy becomes the architecture of elimination, and how a man can be killed in plain sight, leaving investigators with nothing but questions. It is about the invisible war waged on the streets of European cities by operatives whose greatest weapon is not violence, but the ability to disguise violence as something else. And it reveals something darker than any single death: the existence of a global system where certain people can be erased from existence with surgical precision, leaving behind only the illusion of natural order. To understand how Mahmoud died, one must understand who he was and why a state thousands of miles away deemed his elimination necessary. He was born in 1967 in Gaza City. He grew up in neighborhoods where the smell of sea salt mixed with gunpowder. His father taught at a school. His mother worked as a nurse in a UN clinic. From childhood, he watched tanks pass by his home and soldiers shout orders in languages he did not yet understand. Every explosion etched into his memory as a promise he would one day fulfill. Gaza in the 70s and 80s was a laboratory of occupation. Checkpoints, curfews, arbitrary arrests, the daily humiliation of life under military control. Mahmoud's family struggled like everyone, surviving on rations and avoiding unnecessary attention from Israeli patrols. He learned early, survival requires observation. Watch more than you speak. Remember faces and names. Become invisible when necessary and visible only when it is useful. These instincts would later define his operational style. School records describe him as frighteningly calm and exceptionally disciplined, while other students reacted emotionally to the constant violence around them. Mahmoud processed it analytically. He excelled in mathematics and languages, teaching himself Hebrew by secretly listening to Israeli military radio frequencies and deciphering what he heard. By his teens, he was carrying messages for local resistance groups, hiding encrypted notes under the lining of his shoes, and moving from quarter to quarter while Israeli patrols watched, unaware of the quiet teenager. The First Intifada erupted when Mahmoud was 20, turning Gaza into a battlefield of stones against armor. He watched from rooftops as young men threw stones at armored jeeps, symbolic gestures of resistance that usually ended in arrests or worse. But Mahmoud saw what others missed. Strength lies not in power, but in precision. Violence without strategy is just noise. This realization defined everything that followed, transforming him from another angry youth into something much more dangerous. A tactician who understood that patience and calculation could achieve what rage never could. What distinguished Mahmoud from other militants was not ideology, but methodology. He was driven not by blind hatred but by cold analysis. He viewed the conflict as a science of timing and leverage, not as an emotion. Friends described him as meticulous, never impulsive, never loud. His anger was buried under layers of control. He kept a pocket notebook filled with code phrases, diagrams, and numbers. He recorded every meeting, every contact, every potential security risk. His obsession with order bordered on ritual. He preferred even numbers for meetings, even hotel room numbers, even digits in phone codes. For him, structure meant security, disorder meant death. He rarely smiled, but when he did, the smile served specific purposes: to calm, to deceive, to command. He avoided alcohol and crowds, preferring solitude to the risks of social interaction. A close friend later recalled his words, reflecting his entire worldview. A person who talks too much becomes a card that others can read. A person who listens becomes a shadow. This shadow became his essence, the operational alias that allowed him to move through hostile territories for decades without being caught. Within Hamas circles, Mahmoud rose through patient accumulation of trust and demonstration of competence. He did not seek leadership through charisma or speeches, but through results. When others' operations failed, his succeeded. When others compromised their networks through carelessness, his remained divided and secure. By the end of the 1990s, he had become indispensable. A man who could move money across borders, coordinate weapons shipments, and maintain communication between separate cells without leaving digital traces that intelligence agencies could track. Israeli intelligence first noticed him during the First Intifada, when he was arrested with encrypted letters and a list of safe houses. He was held for 7 months under administrative detention, interrogated repeatedly, but Mahmoud gave them nothing. This performance solidified his reputation. When released, he was not just another former prisoner. He was a symbol of resistance through discipline. His operational approach evolved in the 1990s when he realized that traditional militant tactics had reached their limit. Suicide bombings and armed attacks attracted attention, but did not provide strategic advantage. Hamas needed infrastructure, invisible networks of finance and logistics that could sustain operations for years, not months. Mahmoud became the architect of this infrastructure, designing decentralized systems where each cell knew only its immediate contacts, ensuring that if one part was compromised, the entire network would not collapse. By 2000, he moved to Damascus, operating under the protection of the Syrian regime, which hosted exiled Palestinian leaders as part of its regional strategy. From Damascus, Mahmoud coordinated a covert logistical network, unofficially known as the Al-Maslak Path. Its goal was simple: create decentralized financial and transport systems to move weapons, funds, and intelligence data across borders. He recruited engineers, bankers, and smugglers, binding them with loyalty and encrypted communication protocols that made interception nearly impossible. The network stretched across Cyprus, Lebanon, and the Sinai Peninsula. European security services began noticing unusual patterns: cargo containers redirected through multiple ports, charitable organizations transferring cash through discrete banks in Zurich and Vienna. Mahmoud orchestrated all this, maintaining the facade of a humanitarian coordinator. To diplomats, he seemed a man helping refugees. To militants, the invisible hand moving pieces on a chessboard stretching from Gaza to Istanbul. Israeli and American intelligence agencies called him a facilitator, a bureaucratic term that underestimated his influence but hinted at his danger. Within Hamas, competing factions viewed him with caution. Some saw him as just another bureaucrat in exile. Others recognized him as the silent gray cardinal, whose networks provided the resources for their operations to function. But no one could match his access or his operational security. Mahmoud achieved a rare status in that world. He became indispensable, and that made him temporarily untouchable. His methods were surgical, not spectacular. When a collaborator needed to be eliminated, the death looked natural. When a weapons shipment needed protection, it moved along routes that Israeli drones could not predict. He treated geography as geometry, calculating angles and timing with mathematical precision. In 2006, intercepted messages indicated his involvement in funding the kidnapping of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Although he never appeared in official reports, coded ledgers revealed transactions coinciding with the operation's logistics. For Mossad, this was confirmation. Mahmoud was not just financing terrorism but directing specific operations. From 2005 to 2008, intelligence linked him to coordinating smuggling networks that transported modern weaponry from Libya and Sudan through Sinai tunnels. He designed routes that used terrain and timing to evade Israeli surveillance. Each operation demonstrated his engineering mindset, approaching problems with the cold logic of a man for whom violence was just another variable in complex equations. He once told a confidant a phrase that revealed his philosophy: "If you leave a body, it must speak louder than 1,000 words." Fear was a tool, not an emotion. These actions attracted increasing attention from Western agencies. Passports under the names Faris Nasser and Hanisu Ulan appeared in flight logs. Mahmoud slipped through borders, changing not only documents but his entire presentation. Gait, accent, even breathing rhythm. Survival became an art practiced daily. He understood that the moment you become predictable is the moment you become vulnerable. So he embraced chaos in his movements while maintaining rigid control over his operations. In March 2007, an explosion at a warehouse in Port Sudan destroyed a weapons shipment destined for Gaza. Local authorities called it an accident, but secret reports linked the incident to a Mossad interception based on a leak from Mahmoud's network. From that point, he began purging his ranks, quietly removing anyone whose loyalty seemed questionable. Trust became a currency measured in absolutes. You were either completely reliable or completely replaceable. By 2010, Mahmoud had become one of the most wanted men in many intelligence databases. CIA and MI6 analysts cataloged his travels, identifying at least 27 fake identities used over 8 years. His movements were traced through Athens, Vienna, and Budapest, always leaving minimal digital traces. Interpol noted him as a transnational operative, though few outside secret circles knew his real face. The decision followed weeks of debates between political and military leaders, who determined that his elimination would cut the financial arteries feeding Hamas operations in Europe. His death, in their view, would be both a message and a necessity. The sanction came with an encrypted message known only by the codename Operation Cedar Mirror. What Mahmoud did not know, as he continued his cautious movements through European cities, was that every step had become part of a countdown. Israeli surveillance teams tracked him from Athens to Istanbul, from Milan to Rome. Analysts in Tel Aviv studied his patterns, looking for a vulnerable moment when operational conditions would align perfectly. They needed a location where the murder could be staged as a natural death, where operatives could execute the mission and leave without leaving evidence, and where diplomatic repercussions could be managed through plausible deniability. The opportunity materialized when intelligence discovered that Mahmoud planned a trip from Milan to Rome by train. The intercity route offered nearly ideal conditions: a closed environment, predictable schedule, multiple exit points. The train provided unique advantages over planes or hotels. A closed system limited variables, movement provided cover for dispersing the toxin, and security infrastructure at the destination could be entirely bypassed since the operation would conclude before arrival. Mossad's Caesarea unit immediately began operational planning. Caesarea specialized in assassinations abroad, recruiting members from Israel's most elite military units and subjecting them to years of additional training in surveillance, weapons, escape protocols, and the psychological preparation needed to kill with professional detachment. Their operations followed a pattern refined over decades: minimal team size to reduce detection risk, maximum compartmentalization to prevent compromise, and absolute commitment to leaving no traceable evidence. For the Milan-Rome mission, 3 operatives were selected. Their legends were crafted from fragments of real lives and backed by meticulously forged passports that took months to prepare. They were to enter Italy separately, establish themselves as tourists, and coordinate the operation through encrypted devices that looked like ordinary electronics. Psychological profiles of the selected operatives highlighted specific traits: ability to maintain cover under stress, comfort in solitude, and capacity for moral compartmentalization, allowing them to carry out lethal missions without subsequent trauma. On October 9, 2010, the team arrived at Milan's Malpensa airport under the names Martin Weiss, Clara Roth, and Daniel Levi. Their arrival times were staggered to avoid pattern recognition by security systems. Each had light luggage containing communication equipment embedded in a power bank and charger. They moved with the practiced ease of experienced travelers. Nothing in their behavior betrayed the lethal purpose of their presence. Their operational base was an apartment rented in the name of a deceased Italian businessman, one of many ghost properties maintained by Israeli intelligence in European cities. Inside, they set up a command post with encrypted satellite communication channels to Tel Aviv. The apartment's location near Milan's central station provided easy access to transport hubs while maintaining sufficient distance from tourist areas where foreign operatives might attract attention. Mahmoud had been under surveillance since his arrival in Milan days earlier. A sensor installed on his hotel room door frame tracked movement, temperature, and sound. When he purchased a ticket for the Dharma train, the operation entered its final phase. The team divided responsibilities with surgical precision. Weiss was to track Mahmoud's financial activity and movements. Roth was to board the same train, posing as an ordinary traveler. Levi was responsible for logistics, communication, and coordination of the exit. Cameras hidden in Roth's hotel room transmitted encrypted video to Tel Aviv, where analysts recorded every detail of Mahmoud's routine. They noted his habits: morning tea, late breakfast, short phone calls in Arabic, long silences gazing from the balcony. He met no one directly, trusting movement for security, but the operatives were already inside his pattern, anticipating his choices before he made them. They knew his seat number on the train to Rome before he bought the ticket. The toxin chosen for the operation reflected a decade of research into untraceable poisons. Dimethylmercury offered specific advantages: extremely high toxicity, requiring only microscopic doses, delayed onset that could be calibrated for hours after exposure, and symptoms mimicking a heart attack. Pathologists would interpret the death as natural unless specifically looking for mercury compounds. And even then, the chemical form used was designed to degrade quickly, making final identification difficult. The delivery system was equally sophisticated. A modified aerosol device, disguised as an ordinary travel deodorant, contained the toxin in a chemical membrane activated by vibration. An internal timer in the device was to initiate release during the train's motion, dispersing the poison through the air circulation systems in measured doses. The container was to be discarded at an intermediate stop, ensuring that by the time investigators began their work, no physical evidence would remain. On the morning of October 15, Weiss followed Mahmoud to Milan's central station, maintaining the careful distance that surveillance specialists master through years of practice. Roth boarded the same train 15 minutes later, taking a seat 2 rows behind the target. Levi rode ahead in the next car, ready to coordinate communication and monitor for any unexpected complications. Their movements were choreographed in rehearsals conducted at safe houses across Europe. Every gesture was calibrated, every contingency planned. Intercity 582 departed Milan exactly at 9:10. Mahmoud took his window seat in coach number 4, placing his briefcase on his lap and adjusting his glasses before opening a paperback of Machiavelli's The Prince. Observers would later note the irony of his reading choice. 2 rows behind, Roth appeared absorbed in her phone, discreetly activating the aerosol device under her seat. The toxin began its silent work. Microdoses entered the coach's air circulation system. The next 90 minutes passed in the mundane rhythm of ordinary travel. Mahmoud read his book. Passengers dozed or worked on laptops. Italian landscapes flashed by outside. Nothing indicated that violence was occurring invisibly at the molecular level in the air. At 10:45, Mahmoud visited the dining car, where surveillance cameras captured him drinking espresso alone. Calm, unsuspecting that his body was already processing the poison that would stop his heart. He returned to his seat at 11:10. Still showing no symptoms, Roth adjusted the air vent to redirect circulation, increasing the toxin concentration around Mahmoud's seat. He began to cough slightly but dismissed it, reaching for water and then his notebook, where he scribbled Arabic numerals in sequences that investigators would later find unfinished and illegible. By the time the train approached Rome, his complexion had noticeably paled. He stood unsteadily and swaying slightly, headed to the toilet. Inside the locked stall, the toxin completed its work. His breathing slowed, pulse weakened, Consciousness faded. The symptoms precisely matched a heart attack caused by stress or pre-existing conditions. When the conductor knocked 30 minutes later, Mahmoud no longer responded. His eyes were fixed and dilated. The body cooled under fluorescent light. Meanwhile, Roth disembarked in Florence. Weiss and Levi separately exited at Rome's Termini station, blending into the morning crowd. The visible phase of the operation lasted less than 3 hours. The tools and methods demonstrated Mossad's reputation for precise minimalism. Every element served multiple purposes while maintaining plausible innocence. The aerosol canister, assembled in a Tel Aviv laboratory, looked identical to commercial products available in any pharmacy. Its internal mechanism was activated by motion, perfectly suited for train travel where constant vibration provided natural triggering conditions. The poison's delayed onset meant operatives could be long gone before symptoms appeared. Communication between agents occurred through coded Bluetooth pulses emitted by modified headphones. Each message lasted less than a second and was encoded in frequency shifts imperceptible to human hearing. 3 pulses abort. That day, they were not needed. To conceal evidence, Weiss discarded the aerosol device in a trash bin at Florence Station, where it was later melted down with industrial waste. The tracking device used to monitor Mahmoud's movements was programmed to self-destruct upon signal loss, erasing all data. The operation neared compromise several times. A customs officer in Milan briefly questioned Roth about her luggage, lingering on the deodorant. Weiss casually intervened, posing as a fellow traveler helping with translation. The officer smiled and moved on. Later on the train, a child sitting near Mahmoud accidentally dropped a toy that nearly hit the hidden device. Roth picked it up with practiced calm, hiding horror behind a mask of composure. Every second carried the weight of potential catastrophe, but fate or calculation brought the mission to flawless completion. When the conductor finally opened the toilet door, the scene seemed unremarkable. Mahmoud slumped by the sink, his briefcase nearby, eyes wide open but unfocused. A faint almond scent in the air mixed with cleaning fluid. No wounds, no weapons, only stillness. Paramedics pronounced him dead at 13:42, citing possible heart failure. His passport listed him as Mahmoud al-Halat, businessman, age 43. The initial report noted no signs of crime. Italian police sealed the coach for inspection, unaware that the true cause of death had already dissipated through the ventilation system. Within 48 hours, all 3 operatives left Europe, using different routes and other identities. Mahmoud's death was ruled natural, yet those fluent in the language of covert operations immediately recognized the signature. An autopsy at Rome's Sapienza University revealed no external injuries. The heart showed abnormal fibrillation. Lungs displayed slight discoloration consistent with inhaling chemicals. Toxicologists found traces of mercury compounds in the blood, but could not determine their form or origin. A preliminary report concluded, heart arrest caused by stress or exposure to an unknown contaminant. The pathologist privately noted something troubling, a strange symmetry in internal damage, cell degradation without visible poisoning. Too clean, he told a colleague, almost as if someone wanted it to look natural. When Interpol ran Mahmoud's fingerprints, his true identity immediately surfaced. Within hours, encrypted messages flowed between intelligence agencies in Tel Aviv, Brussels, and Washington. Italian security services reviewed CCTV footage from Milan and Rome stations, discovering anomalies. 3 individuals repeatedly appeared in close proximity to Mahmoud, their movements synchronized with his, faces partially hidden, and passports later found to be skillful forgeries using stolen personal data of citizens across Europe. The scandal echoed the 2010 operation in Dubai, where Mossad operatives used similar fake documents during the assassination of Hamas commander Mahmoud al-Mabhouh. Diplomatic tension immediately escalated. Italy demanded explanations from Israel, but official channels remained silent. Israel's foreign ministry issued a brief statement expressing ignorance of the event. Behind closed doors, intelligence alliances strained under the weight of plausible deniability that everyone understood but no one could prove. Media seized on the story of a ghostly death on a moving train, executed by invisible hands. Headlines bristled with speculation. European security services privately expressed admiration for the operation's precision, even while condemning it publicly. The case revealed something uncomfortable. Modern intelligence agencies could conduct sophisticated assassinations virtually anywhere if they had sufficient motivation. And no sovereignty could truly protect targets marked for elimination by states with the resources and will to act abroad. Hamas declared Mahmoud a martyr, accusing Israel of violating international law. In Gaza, thousands attended symbolic funerals, waving flags and shouting vows of revenge. In Tel Aviv, officials neither confirmed nor denied involvement, maintaining strategic ambiguity that characterized all delicate operations. The Italian government faced internal outrage over the breach of sovereignty. Opposition leaders demanded an investigation into foreign espionage on national soil. Behind the scenes, NATO intelligence channels reviewed Israeli activity in Europe, quietly tightening surveillance. But public memory quickly faded, absorbed by new crises. Mahmoud's death, like many before, dissolved into the gray fog of geopolitical necessity. Only those operating in the shadows remembered its perfection. The operation demonstrated what intelligence professionals understood but rarely admitted publicly. Certain individuals could be eliminated with surgical precision anywhere in the world, leaving behind only the illusion of natural order and questions without satisfactory answers. The bureaucratic machinery that sanctioned Mahmoud's death operated far from the train where he died. In fluorescent-lit offices at Mossad headquarters, analysts had prepared the case for his elimination for months. Each operation passed through layers of approvals, each stamped with the cold precision of factory blueprints. Lawyers considered implications for international law. Political liaisons assessed diplomatic risks. Medical experts evaluated toxin options. The language used was deliberately administrative, crafted to sound like business, not murder. Operations were called not assassinations but solutions. Targets were not people, but problems requiring resolution. This linguistic disinfection allowed all involved to maintain psychological distance from the ultimate reality of what they authorized. The hand that signed the death warrant never saw the face that would die. And in that distance lay the perfection of modern statecraft, the ability to kill without touching blood, to eliminate threats with documents that turned moral decisions into bureaucratic processes. The operatives who carried out the mission belonged to Mossad's Caesarea unit, organizations that exist in the space between myth and reality. These specialists live under fictional names in apartments across Europe and the Middle East. Their neighbors have no idea that behind thin walls sit people trained to end lives precisely and quietly. Their weapons, routine and patience. They blend into crowds at airports, cafes, and train stations through years of practice in becoming invisible. They speak many languages, hold many passports, but belong nowhere. Failure is an unspoken word in their world. Survival is measured by successful disappearance after each mission. They leave no medals, no graves, no flags. Their victories are marked only by silence and the absence of those they were sent to eliminate. And when one of them retires, receives a new assignment, or simply vanishes, no one asks questions. Invisible legions exist only as whispers in corridors where nations trade denial for dominance. The Rome operation belonged to a lineage stretching decades. In 1973, Operation Wrath of God sent teams across Europe hunting Black September operatives. People were shot in doorways, poisoned in hotel rooms, tracked through foggy train windows. The mistake in Lillehammer, where an innocent man died due to mistaken identity, taught Mossad to evolve, never again leaving traces of doubt. Each subsequent operation honed the methodology, learning from both successes and failures. In the 1990s, a car bomb in Beirut destroyed a Hezbollah commander. In 2010 in Dubai, Mahmoud al-Mabhouh was suffocated in a luxury hotel by killers disguised as tennis players. Cameras caught them, but identities dissolved like smoke. The death of Mahmoud al-Halat was an echo of these operations, born from decades of learned invisibility. Every method, every trick was a legacy passed through generations of operatives who perfected the art of making people disappear. For Palestinians, Mahmoud's death prompted immediate mourning mixed with defiance. In the crowded alleys of Gaza, his photograph appeared in black frames. Thousands gathered for symbolic funeral ceremonies, chanting his name and pledging to continue resistance. Speakers hailed him as a martyr of precision, one who fought with intellect, not weapons. The sound of grief blended with promises of retaliation, the familiar rhythm of conflict where each death feeds the cycle rather than ending it. In Tel Aviv, the event passed without public ceremonies. In intelligence directorates, analysts filed the case away with clinical detachment. For them, emotions had no place in operational assessment. The objective was achieved. Hamas networks in Europe would be disrupted, at least temporarily. Yet, even within Mossad, some felt the weight of what had been done. Each victory carried an echo of inevitability. Another name erased, another case closed, another cycle of violence delayed but not ended. The international response revealed the contradiction of modern statecraft. Italy protested the breach of sovereignty, while privately understanding little could be done. European countries publicly condemned the operation, while their intelligence services studied its methods for potential application. The United States circulated internal assessments, noting the operation's precision, but maintaining official distance from any endorsement. Diplomatic language masked the reality most governments acknowledged. Assassination as foreign policy would continue as long as nations had both motivation and capability. Mahmoud's death changed little on the surface, but sent ripples through the architecture of covert operations worldwide. Hamas reorganized its European channels, learning from his precision and his downfall. Young operatives studied his methods, noting the errors that led to his exposure. His legend became both instruction and warning. Be invisible, but never believe you are invulnerable. Israel reinforced its reputation for global reach, sending a signal that no protection is absolute and no location truly safe. In the years that followed, new figures replaced Mahmoud. Each carried fragments of his ideology, but none his restraint. The balance he maintained between strategy and violence dissolved, giving way to leaders driven more by revenge than vision. Thus, The assassination meant to bring stability instead bred a new generation of chaos, the predictable consequence of eliminating tacticians and leaving ideologues to fill the vacuum. The truth that emerged from the Rome operation was darker than any single death. It revealed a world built on invisible decisions, where justice is measured in secrecy and morality dissolves in secret ink. Nations kill quietly. Truth survives only as rumor, and the machinery of state power moves forward without pause or accountability. Mahmoud became another name on a list that never ends. His case closed and erased, while somewhere in the bureaucratic depths of intelligence headquarters, another name is already being prepared for a similar fate. The train still runs between Milan and Rome. Passengers sit in coach number 4, unaware of what happened there. Commuters occupy the same seats where Mahmoud died, their morning routine untouched by the history that quietly passed through their compartment. The toilet has been cleaned 10,000 times since that October morning. The air circulation system continues its endless cycle of exchanging breath and space. Nothing marks the place of his death, because that is what perfection looks like. Mundane, unremarkable, leaving no trace that anything extraordinary ever occurred. What does the death of Mahmoud al-Halat say about the world we live in? That certain individuals can be eliminated anywhere and anytime by the will of states with the resources and will to act abroad. That sovereignty means nothing when powerful nations decide someone must die. That truth becomes what remains after evidence disappears. Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this investigation into the invisible war has made you see international relations differently, hit like and share this video. Subscribe because we expose operations that governments deny and the machinery of power operating in perpetual shadow. Click the bell. The next secret operation is already unfolding somewhere, waiting to be uncovered. Invisible war has made you see international relations differently. Hit like and share this video. Subscribe because we expose operations that governments deny and the machinery of power operating in perpetual shadow. Click the bell. The next secret operation is already unfolding somewhere, waiting to be uncovered.